Hi, welcome. In this video, I'd like to really take this, the whole issue of this learning narrative to a very simplistic level as best I can, with having people really understand the problem here with this, with how change packages up, frames up, and the disconnect issue. And here's the thing to really understand. I talk about, the majority of trainers having come into agreement with this narrative, with making assumptions without really getting a sense of the depth of the problem here. And here's the depth of the problem, okay? Understanding that, when behavioral issues are happening, that represents a dog has already gained a certain level of control in the relationship. Okay, the modes of the dog are already sideways. Dog is already having stinking thinking. Okay, it's manifesting, control's manifesting, and this is where the behavior issues come from. Now, here's the thing about I talk about the process, getting the process right. Okay, it's about getting the relationship right between the dog and the owner. So here's the kind of the go-to dog training narrative in the dog training world. Okay, the majority of trainers work off this premise that when the dog and owner step into the process, that out of the starting gate, they're thinking, okay, right away. Their thinking is about response, painting a picture. Okay, the dog sitting, doing a sit, doing a down, doing a come, doing a stay. The typical kind of go-to picture. Okay, so it's a response type of picture. Okay, that they go to, and they align that way. They align their this interpretive narrative that way to say, make certain assumptions. Say, well, when the dog starts going into certain responses, they respond certain ways. That parallels the dog's state of mind. That represents a like-minded state. That good things are happening. And dog behaviors will define as a neutral state. People reward the dog within the state. And the problem with that is with how it packages up to that owner. Just understand something. The dog owner's thinking processes are not reconciled. Okay, the perceptions of the dog are already off with that owner. They already have that owner pegged in a weak position. Okay, the dog's already holding a certain level of control. It can be an incredible amount of control. And so when you play off the narrative that way, the way that the dog training world has basically defaulted into that, and so many dog trainers are just locked into this alignment of how they play off it that way. And here's the thing: regardless, okay, these trainers can incorporate corrections in when the dog's state of mind is hitting a certain level. Okay, they can work off certain adversive tools. And even those tools, I talk about those tools. Once the dog has control, and see, when you don't get the jumping off point right, okay, when you start to play off that narrative, it affects everything else. Okay, just understand. So when you use like a prong collar, that dog can be holding control through that device because the owner is not where they need to be in the relationship because the process isn't right. Okay, I'd really encourage people to really think about what I'm saying. And I parallel this. It's no different than having a relationship problem with a child that's extremely selfish, and a professional steps on into the mix to try to get the relationship right, and they work off of this this kind of response based narrative. You can't do that, okay, and just make assumptions on where the relationship is going based on just that type of superficial thing. There's more to relation. There's depth of relationship. So people wonder, why it is that I continue to talk about it. Just apply common sense, because here's the thing: there's incredible problems happening in the dog training world directly correlated, associated to this how this is playing off this narrative. And these trainers are trying to figure this stuff out, and then what happens? The dog gets the blame. Okay, but this has been the way it's been for forever. And I'm just, showing exactly, okay, here's the problem. It's this narrative, it's just this jumping off point that most trainers just mindlessly have and they can't even, kind of can't trade off. They can't even get their head around this. But I'm saying the process has to take the right shape, okay? It has to align properly to make sure that a level of change is happening in and through that owner that corresponds to the level of relational change that needs to happen to get these control issues back. Okay, and it's just like everything's about appearances, right? So, the deceptive part is, and people are just looking at response. Well, it looks good. I mean, it feels good, and it must be good. Be very aware of this problem. I just encourage any dog owner listening to this, and you're wondering what the heck is going on. Why is it that my dog this isn't working out? I don't care if it's balance training or not. Just understand the majority of trainers have aligned themselves with this kind of default narrative out of the starting gate. Okay, I show very clearly training is not a type of learning-based exercise. This narrative in the MEX is in fact the problem because of how it aligns with the dog's state of mind. I mean, you can't look at a dog a certain way and assume certain things. Dog have stinking thinking. They could be, so certain interactions need to expose. This is why if you look at the integrity of my method, it exposes, very intentional with exposing the problem. The cards are being constantly laid on the deck, until relational change happens. The methodology has to take the right shape. So the process isn't right. Totally different though when people say, well, I've had a certain dog and I never had to, well, it's because you're thinking properly, okay, to begin with. So the person, the individual, supersedes everything, can override the negative impact of this narrative, but typically not. So, for example, what I can get away with incorporating this narrative in, it can be extremely detrimental to, say, 80% or 70% of the people that I help if I'm not aware of what that narrative represents from the get-go. If I don't understand people stepping into a process, how this is, what it's doing. Again, you can't work off that type of a premise. But again, if people are trying to figure out why it is that the dog training world is in such a disaster, I call it, or such a mess. This is it. So there's no redeeming qualities, okay, within that learning narrative itself. There just isn't. Not the way that it's being presented by way of as trainers step into a process with these issues. It just doesn't. But again, apply everything I say to a human example. It'll start making complete sense. Just apply common sense. It'll make sense. So thanks for watching.